Defining and measuring poverty in the US, taking a look beyond income. 11.8% of Americans were said to be in poverty in 2018, which is around 38.1 million people. This figure is a full million below what the number was in 2017. But what do these numbers mean? How do we decide if a person is poor? In other words, how should we define poverty? Most people are familiar with the term poverty and what it means, but they struggle to define it. The average person defines poverty as a lack of economic resources or insufficient income. Despite not being incorrect, this definition has proven to be inadequate. For instance, how much income is sufficient income? Let's look at a hypothetical scenario. Say Bob is a construction worker slightly above a certain threshold for sufficient income, and Rob is slightly below it. Bob requires constant medical attention due to an injury on the job, which adds up to huge expenses, and Rob has no such expenses, but receives food stamps and housing subsidies since he is below the sufficient income threshold, which offsets the slight gap in income sufficiency. It seems like Bob is poor and Rob isn't, but they're classified oppositely. So we have to realize that poverty is a problem that is intricately interwoven with numerous different aspects of human life, and hence it is important that we understand that income is only one variable in the multivariate equation that is poverty. Therefore, we should turn our focus to all the aspects that factor into poverty if we are to appropriately define and measure it. We define poverty to be a situation in which people are deprived of basic capabilities due to insufficient economic resources. In order to fully understand what this entails, let's delve into what the capabilities approach is. Capabilities are simply the set of hypothetical beings or doings that a person in society has access to. For example, an average person in the US is capable of obtaining nutritious food every day. This just means that if people want nutritious food, they're capable of obtaining it. Similarly, a rich person may have the capability of traveling around the world, but a poor person does not have the capability of taking such vacations. These are examples of capability. The core of the capabilities approach is the belief that all people intrinsically have value and the right to live a dignified life just by virtue of being human. Therefore, we believe that there is a set of basic or central capabilities which all people need to possess, a basic set of beings and doings that people should be capable of in order to live a dignified life. Martha Nussbaum, one of the most renowned modern philosophers, defines a list of 10 central capabilities. The contents of this list is contestable since people differ in cultures, traditions, history, and political thinking. For instance, a person living in South Asia might have a different idea of what these central capabilities should be due to the vast differences in lifestyles and surroundings. There are differences even within the US. A person living in San Francisco who has a greater income than a person living in Virginia might have a lower set of capabilities due to differences in costs of living. These sorts of differences factor into how poverty is perceived and therefore how basic capabilities are defined. Hence, we will not attempt to define a list of basic capabilities in this video. So if we define poverty to be a situation in which people are deprived of basic capabilities due to insufficient economic resources, we can more holistically encompass aspects of poverty. Now let's talk about the existing measures of poverty.
The official poverty measure, OPM, was developed in the 1960s by Molly Orshansky, an economist and statistician. It aimed to judge the needs of the poor and set poverty thresholds which determined who in the country would be categorized as experiencing poverty. The OPM's thresholds were built using the Economic Food Plan, or Thrifty Food Basket, which was the lowest amount of money that could provide a nutritious diet. It also used a 1955 survey which indicated that families over 3 people spent 1/3 of their post-tax income on food. So the OPM set its threshold at the cost of food for the family times 3. Proponents of the OPM reference how the model is simplistic, as well as easily updated with inflation. Another advantage of the OPM is that we've been using it since its invention, making it well known and a barometer of our economic success. A final advantage of the OPM is that it indicates that less people are poor than most other measures. For instance, some experts like Robert Rector believe and have survey results to indicate that if the average American saw the average poor person and their material possessions, they wouldn't categorize them as poor. The OPM showed a 2017 poverty rate of 12.3%, while the SPM, Supplemental Poverty Measure, showed a 13.9% rate that same year. Concerns with the OPM's effectiveness due to it being an absolute measure prompted a National Academy of Sciences, NAS, study in 1990. In their findings, they reported that the OPM was flawed due to the measure not reflecting key government policy, not accounting for rising standard of living since the 1960s, not accounting for variation in non-discretionary expenses, variations in medical out-of-pocket cost, ineffective accounting of family situations, and not adjusting for geographic differences, which could mean higher rent or more expensive food, and not including in-kind benefits such as food stamps. An argument can also be made against Rector that the material possessions of a person are insufficient in measuring whether or not they are poor. The OPM can accurately assess some people's situation much better than others. For example, OPM would work well for a family with married parents and 2 children who lived in an area close to their place of work and had low medical out-of-pocket costs. However, a family with parents who were unmarried, who had to commute to work, and suffered from medical issues not covered by health insurance, or they're uninsured, would be spending a large chunk out of their threshold that was intended to go towards other resources. These issues prompted the development of other poverty measures, such as the Supplemental Poverty Measure, SPM.
Based on the 1990 National Academy of Sciences study, SPM measures poverty by economic deprivation. Just like OPM, SPM uses a dollar threshold based on the consumer survey data of how much people on the 33rd percentile are spending on food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. Then, an extra 20% is added to the threshold to account for other expenses. Then further adjustments are made to account for differences in costs of living by geographic location, family size, and composition. The SPM also accounts for in-kind benefits like food stamps and housing subsidies. Unlike the OPM, SPM measures income after taxes, after subtracting some expenses such as medical out-of-pocket expenses, non-discretionary expenses like fuel costs for driving to work, and so on. Putting all of this together, it is clear that the SPM is a much improved version of the OPM and the better choice since it looks beyond just income. However, does the SPM fully fit our capabilities-based definition of poverty? Let's say Sally is considered to be above the income poverty threshold generated by the SPM. However, she is working 3 jobs in order to generate this income at the expense of her health. One could argue that people don't have to work 3 jobs in order to be above the SPM threshold in America, but it is necessary that our measure stays true to our definition in all cases. So if we consider good health to be a central capability, by our definition, she is being deprived of her capability to have a healthy life due to economic constraints, and hence we consider her to be poor. This demonstrates that the SPM, while being the better choice than OPM, does not fully fit our definition of poverty. It is often argued that capabilities cannot be measured since they're not what people do, but what people are capable of doing. However, non-financial capability indicators do already exist, and these indicators could be integrated into the SPM in order to develop a new measure that aptly fits our definition of poverty. Literacy rate could be one capability indicator since it affects people's ability to get higher paying jobs. Another example is mortality rate, which shows how healthy a group of people are because the health of a person directly affects their ability to earn a good living. These indicators would have to be chosen in accordance to what we define the central capabilities to be. Unfortunately, we do not have a measure that integrates capability indicators. Among the measures we have now, SPM better fits our definition than OPM, but it is imperative that we change the way we measure poverty.
The way that our country views and aids the poor may change in the coming years. Since the 1990s, we've already seen a significant rise of in-kind benefits, and candidates for this coming presidential election are proposing policy changes that could result in universal basic income, which would entail $1,000 monthly payments for every American, Medicare for all, and free college education for those who can't afford it. These would all change poverty in the United States in their own right and demonstrate a need for new measures of poverty, as the way we treat the poor changes over time, and this also highlights a flaw of absolute measures of poverty. In conclusion, we feel that it would be best to utilize some of the features of the SPM combined with the capabilities approach to studying poverty, as we feel this would best fit our definition of poverty.